Hey guys, I'm Regina.
I'm Chris.
Thanks for tuning in again. We are here in beautiful Arizona, Chris's hometown, and this week Chris is going to actually talk about his life and struggles and things that God has brought him through as well. Hope you get a blessing out of anything that you see or hear this week. And if you have anything you want us to pray for, please let us know. God bless.
God bless you.
Lost our safe, find their way at the sound of your great name. All condemned, feel no shame at the sound of your great name. Every fear has no place at the sound of your great name. The enemy, he has to leave at the sound of your great name. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain for us. Son of God and man, you are high and lifted up, and all the world will praise your great name. All the weak find their strength at the sound of your great name. Hungry souls receive grace at the sound of your great name. Fatherless, they find their rest at the sound of your great name. The sick are healed and the dead are raised at the sound of your great name. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain for us. Son of God and man, you are high and lifted up, and all the world will praise your great name. Redeemer, my healer, Lord Almighty, my Savior, defender, you are my King. Redeemer, my healer, Lord Almighty, my Savior, defender, you are my King. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain for us. Son of God and man, you are high and lifted up, and all the world will praise your great name. Jesus, worthy is the Lamb that was slain for us. Son of God and man, you are high and lifted up, and all the world will praise your great name. Your great name. Your great name.
Well, good morning out here in beautiful Arizona. Guess it's my turn to tell a story. I'm Chris. I was born out here in Tucson, raised a Catholic. Raised as a Catholic, pretty active growing up in the Catholic Church. But it was something my parents never forced on me. They didn't force me to be religious or do anything like that. You know, it was just kind of, we were a Catholic family. Went to church on Sundays. Had a good upbringing. Had a great family life. As I got to be a teenager, we moved out of town where I met some friends, and friends get in trouble sometimes, and we did. We got ourselves in trouble a couple times. One of those times, I ended up having to do community service. And so I went to my church, my local church there, and my community service ended up taking my priest into town. He had a really nice Formula Firebird with a big 454 in it, and my community service was driving that car into Tucson, where he would buy me breakfast, and then we'd go back to the church and I would go home. I did that as many times as it took to equal 20 hours. Wasn't much of a community service. But on our last, when the community service was over, he took me to dinner. And at the end of that dinner, he went to hug me, and I was uncomfortable about that. I just remember being uncomfortable because of what had happened to me as a Boy Scout. I was very active in Boy Scouts as a child, as a young teenager, and my as time went on, I became a Life Scout, you know, which is just right below Eagle Scout. I was really working to become an Eagle Scout. It was one of a goal that I had, and the Scoutmaster ended up being inappropriate with me. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but I was afraid to say anything, so I didn't. But he was inappropriate, and eventually I think he'd gotten himself into trouble because the Scout Club had to stop. I wasn't upset about that, but I never did make my Eagle Scout ranking that I was really working hard to be. So then, jump back to working with that priest. When he hugged me, I just was very uncomfortable. I don't think he meant anything wrong with it, but just with my experience with my Scoutmaster, I didn't like that. So I quit going to church. You know, I'm a young adult now. Didn't go to church anymore. I joined the Air Force. I'd never really been away from home before. Felt very homesick, so I put in on my dream list Davis Mountain Air Force Base, which is in Tucson, and I got it. So I came back home after basic training and tech school, and I'm back here in Tucson, and with my girlfriend from high school, we got pregnant with my daughter Candace, but her mother just wasn't a good match for me. She wanted to she was an addict, to lack of a better word. She was a coke addict, and she didn't come home very often at nighttime. So it was just me and my daughter, and finally was able to, after a couple years, I got divorced from her and took full custody of my daughter. I'm in the Air Force as a single parent, and I had a real good friend of mine who lived next door to me in the barracks, and we became very, very close. We did a lot together, hiking, camping. He and I got stuck on Mount Lemmon in a snowstorm. He had to be evacuated off by the sheriff's department. We had a lot of fun together. But he had this Blazer that had a tremendous amount of stereo equipment in it, and he was driving down one of the city streets in Tucson and rear-ended somebody. And he told me when he went back the next day to get it, that someone had broken into his car and stolen all of his stereo equipment, and his steering wheel, everything. He had to have the car towed away. So he asked me and another guy to be character witnesses for an insurance claim, since he didn't have receipts for all of his stuff. I agreed, but I also agreed to increase the value of all his stereo equipment. I was trying to help him out, got a big deductible to pay for. So we didn't increase what he had, we just increased the quality of what he had. So he gets his insurance check, he gets his truck all put back together, all new stereo system, and a year later he went on vacation and someone stole his Blazer while it was parked on the Air Force base. Well, since this was 2 insurance claims in a year, the OSI got involved. That's the Air Force, like FBI. They got involved to investigate these two big insurance claims. And that's when I found out that the first theft never even happened. He had made arrangements with a couple guys we work with who did paint and body on the side, and he gave them all his stereo equipment in exchange for the body work. But then he made such a big insurance claim, he just had the car professionally done and lied to me. Well, since I lied to the insurance company also, I got in trouble. I was unable to re-enlist in the Air Force. I had big plans to stay in the Air Force for 20 years. While the OSI was investigating that insurance claim, I lost my security clearance at work, and I had to work for the barracks. I didn't live in the barracks, but I had to work there, clean the place. I had to mow the lawn. I had to pick weeds. The guy who ran the barracks was probably one of the worst people I've ever worked for. Very mean. I'm guessing his life wasn't going too well that he had that job, because no one joins the military to be barracks supervisors. But that's what he was, and he was just a very mean, unfriendly person. And I was driving my motorcycle during this time, going through my divorce, going through the issues at work, and the Article 15 I was facing because of insurance fraud. And I was riding my motorcycle, and I had this tremendous urge at 60 miles an hour just to jump off the thing. And it came upon me so fast that I actually had to catch myself before I did it. I was actually starting to stand up on the pegs before I realized that this urge had even come over me. I don't know where that urge came from. I'm not one to commit suicide. I don't know why that came over me, but I just remember this urge was so powerful that I almost didn't stop it. During this time, I moved in with my dad, and Candace moved in with my mom until I was able to get back on my feet and get my own apartment again. And my mom had found a school about 2 hours from Tucson, which was supposed to be a really good aviation school. I was going nowhere in life. I loved airplanes, so I moved to Bisbee, Arizona to go to aircraft mechanic school. I was dating a girl at the time. We were actually engaged. She moved there with me. There we had Derek, my son. While I was going to that school, I got a job in Tucson working for Learjet on the weekends. So I would commute every weekend into Tucson. I went to school all day long during the week, and then she worked every night. So we weren't around each other very much while I was going to school. And when I came home from Tucson one weekend, she left me a note, and she had moved out. She left me for one of her co-workers. So now I'm back to being a single parent again, but this time trying to finish my schooling, my college. I finally got through, and I was able to get a full-time job with Bombardier, and I was able to raise my daughter and get my son on the weekends. And I did that for a couple years before getting an opportunity to go to Wichita to help them build a brand new airplane. I went to Wichita for a month, and they offered me a job. They liked my work, and they offered me a job. So I talked to my girlfriend, who was helping me with Candace back home in Tucson, and she wanted to go too. So I got back to Tucson, packed up all our stuff, and the three of us moved to Wichita. After about 6 months, struggling to make it out there, I get a call from her grandmother that I should go to her church. They had a seminar at their church. It's about a month-long seminar, but it would help me understand her background. I didn't want to go. I don't know what a Seventh-day Adventist is. I was raised a Catholic. I didn't want to go to this church. Supposed to go to a buddy's house that night, and he told me, "There's nothing wrong with church, my friend." And when he said that, it really kind of changed my attitude towards it. So I went. I was met by very friendly people. I was very surprised at how friendly people were. They did not pass around the plate asking for money like I expected. It was just seminars. It was just a couple hours a night for about a month, learning about the Bible in ways that I had never learned before as a Catholic. And it really it took hold of me. The message that I heard really just sunk in and took hold of my life, and it changed me in many ways. But one of the bad things about those seminars is they focus on things that make them different from all the other churches. So I end up really focusing on these laws, and I focused on what I ate and what I drank and what I wore and the music I listened to. And not that there's anything wrong with that stuff at all, but my focus was on the rules. My focus was on what not to do, what I shouldn't do, things like that. While we lived in Wichita, we had Leslie. We were very involved in the church, had some really good friends in the church, had a lot of support there, and was able to get Derek on summers and holidays. It was nice to see him when we got him, but it was hard. It was very hard letting him go when those times were over with. He would go back to Tucson and he would cry, and he would miss his mom when he was with us, and it was just difficult. We ended up having Leslie, and it was just, things were going well. But then my work went to a second shift operation. They put me on second shift, and it just wasn't working for me and my family. I did not like to work second shift because I just didn't get to see my family at all. Got an opportunity to move back to Tucson. I still kept in touch with my friends down here, and they really needed help with the new airplane down here in Tucson. So we moved. While we lived in Tucson, we got pregnant again and had Nathan. Just got Derek quite a bit since we lived closer to him. Was able to get Derek every other weekend, and of course on holidays, and a lot of time during the summer. We had a pretty full family. I really enjoyed my job at the time. I was a lead of a crew, and I felt valued there. I put in a lot of hours. The opportunity was there to work a lot, and I did. I flew a lot in the airplanes. Really enjoyed what I did here as we built these airplanes. One day I stayed late, and there's a guy in the back of the airplane working, and we started talking, and he knew that I rode bicycles, and he did too. So he worked second shift. I didn't get to see him very often, but finally he moved to day shift, and we could start cycling together. So we started riding, and we rode, like 3-4 days a week. We'd leave after work and bring our bikes to work and go for bike rides, and on the weekends we'd go ride, and we'd ride at nighttime when it was too hot with just our headlights, and did a lot of cycling together. And as we rode, we talked a lot about God. And I just remember sitting on a big rock, eating a Cliff Bar, and just watching the sunset over this canyon. And he and I are just sitting there talking about just God and the beauty of nature and everything, and why we love doing this so much. He invited me to his church. He played guitar, and he invited me to his church to watch him, to play one weekend. And I went, and the church service was just nothing like I had experienced before. The music was incredible. The sermon was incredible. I felt like he was talking directly to me. So I started going regularly to church with Jim, and remember I told you earlier that I was really focusing a lot on the rules, and I knew the laws of God very well, and I knew Jesus with my walk with the Lord, but it wasn't until I started going to church with Jim that I really found the love of Jesus. So focusing on Jesus' love versus for God's laws really changed my whole experience of what it meant to be a Christian. I do remember one of his sermons talking about how important it was to be equally yoked with your partner. And he said, he goes, if you start off being equally yoked and you end up not being equally yoked, he goes, I don't know what to tell you then, but it's important when you get together, when you find that partner, that you are equally yoked. And I remember just kind of just feeling sad because I wasn't equally yoked. She had her friends, and her addictions. There were many nights when I'd wake up to go to work and she wasn't home yet. It was just a very rough time, but thankfully I had Jim, and Jim was there for me during these very difficult times. Having God, such a focal point of this friendship was very critical in helping. Morning. But then there came a time when Bombardier, the company, had to shut down operations in Tucson, and I had to make a decision on what I was going to do. I prayed and prayed and prayed about it, and I had 2 job interviews the next day. One was for a position in Tucson, and one was for a position back in Wichita. I did not want to go back to Wichita. So I prayed about it, and I just said, God, I'm giving this to you. You close the doors and open the doors where I need to be. So I went to my interviews, and my interview for the job here in Tucson was a technical interview, and they asked me a lot of technical questions about the airplane, and I nailed it. I knew everything that they asked me. I even overheard my supervisor talking to the guy that I would be working for, asking if I could go back and forth as they needed me until they completely shut down the operations. And then I interviewed for the Learjet job. And it was like one of those scenario interviews where they ask you, what would you do in this position? What would you do if this person did this and this person did that? How would you respond? And I didn't care. I didn't want to go. So I just made stuff up and shook their hand and walked out. I was pretty confident that I had the other job. The next day, I got a phone call from both, and God put me where He wanted me. I'm moving back to Wichita. So I honestly thought that this was gonna help my marriage, moving back to Wichita, being with our old church family, because that's all we had there was our church family. But eventually the marriage failed for the same problems I was having in Tucson. Those same problems continued in Wichita, and I finally couldn't do it anymore, so I got divorced again. Now I'm back to being a single parent. After my divorce, I started hanging out with a friend who transferred from Tucson. I didn't know him in Tucson. He worked on the Learjets, and I worked on the Global Expresses, so I didn't know any of the Learjet guys who transferred to Wichita when I did. But Barry and I became very close. We did a lot of cycling together. He was very fit, very disciplined with his diet and his exercise, and he and I became very close. We did a lot of road trips together on the bicycle, camping trips. We went to Durango for the Iron Horse a few times. Went on mountain biking adventures, and we just had a lot of fun together. My church really wasn't there for me. Everyone had families. I no longer had a family. I just felt like an outcast. So I was surrounded by people, but I felt alone at my church. Started going to church with Barry, and it was there that Jesus spoke to me again and kind of reminded me that I wasn't going to find happiness in the life I was living. And while I was at his church, I prayed and I just asked that Jesus comes into my life, that he fills that void. And I was pretty amazed at how quickly the emptiness left me when after making that prayer. And I was fine. I was fine being by myself. I had my children. We spent quality time together, and I was very content with my life. Flash forward a little while, and a real good friend of mine who played guitar with me invited another friend of his to join our music group. She had just gone through her divorce, and she started singing with me. I've known Regina for a very long time. Our kids went to school together. I was a Pathfinder leader and an adventurer leader at our church, and her kids were involved with that. So I knew her, but we never really talked. And over time, as she hung out with our music group, we got to know each other and started hanging out with each other, and we became very close. And eventually I married her. She's right here. And I'm blessed to have the life that I have right now. I look back at the struggles I've had, and I made it through every one of them. I made it through every one of them because God was there. God was a part of my life from being a child until now. Even I would say anybody who is struggling with anything, don't try to do it on your own. Find one person that you can talk to. Pray. Turn to God. If you don't know one person, God will put that person in your life. He's done it to me. He's done it to me in many ways that I don't even realize that they've happened until I've looked back. So that's my story.
Saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my shining